Lads, lasses, and the rest of the masses, welcome back to another tactical breakdown. Today we're going to be taking a look at West Ham versus Chelsea, the 2-1 fixture that just happened on Monday, and kind of go through some of the nuances that we saw from Enzo Maresca and how he kind of turned this game around from what was rather a poor first half from Chelsea and made it into a victory for us, coming back from a 1-0 deficit to win 2-1. Now, I'm not going to be as in-depth as I usually would be. I haven't got any notes, so I'm going to kind of ramble and talk about the way that I saw things off the cuff, and then we can kind of decipher what I personally think were the main reasons that we won this game in the end. Firstly, I think it's important for us to talk about the starting 11 that we played. Massive changes that came through from Enzo Maresca in this game in particular was that Jurgensen played. We didn't expect to see him. After the mistakes that Sanchez was making, this was inevitable that this was going to happen at some point. Very courageous decision from Enzo to drop our main goalkeeper to play Jurgensen, and I think that he had a relatively good game overall. Now, the rest of the team was pretty standard. I think the only thing you could really say is that it might have been a bit weird to see Tosin in the lineup because we've been seeing Chalobah play there. Maybe we could see someone else like Joshua Chempong, who's obviously been playing here. He can play here as well. Maybe we would have seen him, but Tosin's been playing very well, and it's good to see him get into the team. Apart from that, the rest of the team is very standard. In terms of how we line up and the way that we play, we always move into this 3 at the back type system, and that is aided by a inversion of the midfield by one of our fullbacks. Now, in this game, we did see a bit of both of them doing some inversion, but the main one is always going to be Cucurella whenever we play this way. With him in the team, he's always going to be the player that comes inside to join the midfield and allow us to play this 3 at the back across here. Now, this does force us into a bit of a weird situation with Colwill being out on this wide left channel, which he's not entirely comfortable with, and we saw obviously eventually him make a mistake from this position, and I think that's mainly because he's kind of tasked on these wide areas to be a bit more aggressive and get up the pitch, where he's not mainly used to doing that. He's mainly used to being in the central role and kind of distributing the ball. Unfortunately, he's had to play out here because of the inclusion of James. Now, this sets us up in this box midfield that we usually talk about, and sometimes this turns into a diamond, with Cole Palmer obviously being more of a 10 and kind of rotating the team around a little bit. But because of the way that we play with Cucurella here and the way that Enzo likes to play, we actually kind of see this swap around, right? We see Cucurella coming up into the 10 role. We see Enzo playing a bit deeper in this kind of left 8, as it were. Caicedo obviously being the holder, and Palmer kind of operating in these spaces, able to get up into a right-sided 10 role, but also being able to come back and kind of facilitate the play when we're building up from the back. And for the most part, this does usually work. We get these 5 players in the offensive areas, these 5 players in the defensive areas, and obviously if we need an extra body, Enzo will be the one that kind of commits up. We leave Caicedo as the lone player here. But for some reason in this game, we find it really hard to actually make any inroads from the wide areas, which is what we usually like to do. I speak about this all the time, but our main function of this team is to get our 2 players that are out in the wide areas, whether that be wingers or, as we saw later on in the game, Marc Cucurella, which we'll talk about in a little bit. The players will get nice and wide as they can and try and isolate their fullback or whoever is out here trying to mark them and get into these 1v1 scenarios. Now, we always like to see our players being tricky and trying to win these 1v1s. It's something that has been a big part of how we've played this season, with players like Madueke being able to try and beat their men, be tricky and go either side. Obviously, Madueke, I've spoken about him in the past. Very good at getting around players on his right foot, but also very good at cutting onto his stronger left foot, trying to get shots off that way, etc. Now, we see this a lot with Jadon Sancho too. Jadon Sancho is a player that can go both ways. He does like to favour this inside channel, and I think that is something we kind of saw happen a lot in this game, where we kept seeing Sancho trying to come inside and Cucurella from this left 10 position trying to push into the box from here in this inverted role. Now, I don't think this worked particularly well against West Ham. I think they defended this pretty well, and for the most part we struggled to make any inroads, because when you are playing this way and playing out in the wide areas, you're mainly trying to find a target in the middle. And to be fair to him, Jackson did not have a very good game, and he's not very much of a box presence as it were anyway. In fact, to the point where when we were getting the ball into these high wide areas on the right hand side and the ball was being swung in by either Madueke, either being his man, or by James, who would come up to the pitch to kind of swing one in late, what we kept seeing is that it was actually Cucurella getting high into the box that was getting on the end of these, and not Jackson. And even though he has scored a lot of goals from this scenario recently, this isn't what we really want to be seeing. We don't want to be seeing Cucurella being the one in the box trying to receive things. He's more of a player that we want to be seeing out wide and being able to deliver. The same could be said for Cole Palmer as well, where Cole Palmer is a player that we want to see getting on the ball, getting into these areas outside the box, being able to take shots, and obviously he does manage to do that a few times in this game, but for the most part what he's actually kind of tasked to do was trying to get into the box and get on the end of Jadon Sancho's crosses, which again is not really his style. We want to see him being the one playing on the ball and being able to whip the ball in for a target man, for example, or for a late runner, which we do see him do at times when he is able to interchange with Madueke and kind of get out to these wide areas at times, but for the most part we were kind of struggling to break down the stalwart defence of West Ham in the first half, until in the second half we made some very, very interesting changes. Now the first is a forced change, with Jackson obviously coming off with a small hamstring injury. We get to see the appearance of young Mark Guiu, who we haven't seen very much of in the Premier League. We've seen a lot of him in the Conference League, and he has shown qualities that we know can be a bit different to Jackson, with the fact that he's relentless in his press, he's more of a target man, he's a bigger box presence, which was something that we kind of needed. But not only that, but I think in this game his hold-up play in particular was really, really good, and that was facilitated by the fact that the second change was that Jadon Sancho came off for Christopher Nkunku. Now, we do not want to see Christopher Nkunku playing on this left wing, of course, but what this does is it changes the dynamic of these two players in these left channels, because it allows Nkunku to play in this left 10 and Cucurella to go out wide and play as this wide player. Now, I think this really goes to show Enzo's philosophy with the way that he does his tactics, is that this is not a winger, this is not a player that has to play like a winger, this is just a wide man, and regardless of who's playing here, the option for this player is to stay out wide, stretch the defense, and kind of be able to deliver and get in behind for crosses, for example, or just be able to play a ball into our inside players for them to then create. And we saw a lot of that in the second half, with Nkunku and Guiu, as I mentioned, bouncing off of each other, being able to play 1-2s, allow Nkunku to get into the area, get shots off like that. And I think this was actually a very sneakily good cameo from Nkunku, and it's good to see him being trusted in this left 10, because this has been what we've been worried about with Nkunku, is that him playing as a 9 doesn't really work, and we've seen that being experimented with. I don't think he's very good there. We've seen him kind of being overshadowed in this position by Joao Felix, who has now gone out on loan to AC Milan, so he cannot take that place. And I think now we get to see the best of Nkunku if he is in this role. And it's something we've wanted to see. We've wanted to see Nkunku and Palmer in the same team, and if we are able to adapt the way that we've been playing recently, and obviously put Cucurella out here, we know how good of an attacking threat he can be, but I think he's much suited to making the overlap and getting into these areas to put balls across, because he has got good delivery on him. It's much more, it's much easier for him to do that from a wide area than if he's in this 10 role where he's having to get into the box. The third change obviously sees Madueke come off for Neto in a straight swap, and though this doesn't change our dynamic very much, with it being, as I said, a straight swap between the two, Neto has got some different qualities to Madueke. I think he's got a bit of a better burst of pace, but more so he's also a player that won't go on the outside very much, and we do see this from the way that he plays. We obviously get our goal from a bit of a combination of the things that we've said before. Now, whilst he is on the ball and he's trying to do the play the ball into the box with that curler to the back post, now usually this wouldn't work because Jackson wasn't very much of a box presence, he wasn't much of a threat to the two centre backs in the box. However, Guiu, when he came on, he was much more threatening from these scenarios, and they were much more well aware of Nkunku coming in around the back, and obviously, or Cucurella coming in around the back, and Guiu being in the centre, that it caused confusion when the ball does eventually go in, and obviously the ball ends up at Cucurella, who's made this run into the box late, who can knock it back to Enzo Fernandez, who has gotten up really high. Obviously, Nkunku's in the box at this point. And once Enzo takes his strike, the thing which is very important for me, and the thing which I'm very impressed with Neto, is that he plays this ball and he doesn't just watch it. He doesn't ball watch and hope that someone gets on the end of it. He follows his own cross. He plays the ball and then immediately runs into the box hoping for a rebound, and that's exactly what happens where he gets into the box. Enzo shoots at the goalkeeper, it's saved, it spills out to Neto, and he gets our equalising goal. Now, I think Madueke probably would have been able to do a similar thing. I'm not going to say that this is particularly a personnel thing, but it's very much a byproduct of the fact that we now have a box presence that's actually a threat. And obviously, Cucurella being in this opposite or wide position, he gets to get into a position which he wouldn't be getting into otherwise. Now, he would be more central if he was still playing in this 10 role with Nkunku, and he wasn't. In fact, he was actually nice and wide in the back post and able to kind of play the ball across for Enzo to then get the strike off. It's also worth mentioning that at the start of this phase, before we win the ball and get our equalising goal, James has already come off at this point for Gusto. He's the one who plays the ball to Neto, so that's another substitution that we made. And also we kind of saw a bit of a change in the way that our players were playing in terms of who was getting into the box and who was allowed to be outside the box. We saw Caicedo obviously staying as deep as he could be in terms of being able to get up and press, but also kind of being able to get back when the counter attack happened. But Enzo, we saw Enzo actually coming into this right channel at times and allowing Palmer to drop deep to pick up the ball and then kind of play from there. And obviously Enzo, he was pressing tirelessly throughout the whole game. He was putting in an absolute shift. Very good performance from him. He was able to try and get into the box and occupy players and allow Palmer this free role to be able to create things. And that's very, very important for our second goal in that we eventually get, because we see that exact same thing happen again, where we see Enzo in the box occupying a centre-back. We see Nkunku in the box occupying a centre-back, and then we see Palmer, who's in this free role, able to combine with Cucurella. Now Cucurella is out wide again, holding up a player, and it allows Palmer this space to kind of just easily drift into the box. He gets his shot come cross in, and it bounces off Wan-Bissaka over the goalkeeper. This is definitely not an intentional shot, let's say that. It's obviously a cross, but we take those, and it's that space that he is allowed to kind of get because of the way that we've now transitioned into this new system with Nkunku playing on the left channel, that he's able to play here. Because if he wasn't on the pitch here, this would be Palmer, and Palmer would be here, and we'd be hoping for someone like Cucurella to be the one that's going to kind of unlock this defense like this, and he's just not going to do that. He's much more suited to being out on this wing and occupying players and being a nuisance this way, and obviously, as I said, getting around in the back post and allowing Nkunku to be the more the one that's going to get into the box and occupy players, and it gives us this free role for our best player to actually shine and kind of show his creative abilities. Because we have been seeing recently that he has been a bit stifled by these low block teams because he is playing quite high up, and he has been having to drop incredibly deep to try and get involved in the game. So it's good to see him being able to get this free role, and of course getting us more goals, getting us the winning goal. And once we get that winning goal, we see another nice bit of substitutions from Enzo Maresca, because we don't really get to see him make these types of changes often. It's good to see him kind of showing his tactical flexibility and the fact that we can get ahead in games with tactical changes with his substitutions, and then decide to bring on an extra centre-back in Trevor Chalobah, who I believe comes on for Cole Palmer in the end, even though we have the same kind of formation, whilst Gusto kind of moves into the midfield and we get Chalobah on this right hand side and Tosin stays in the same place. It kind of makes us a lot more defensively solid having a centre-back on the pitch rather than having a full-back out here and having a more defensive player who's going to kind of play into the 10. And that was this week's tactical breakdown. Bit of a short one today because I just wanted to talk about the small changes that we saw, and it's very good and very encouraging to see from Enzo Maresca these tactical changes that we've been seeing and this tactical flexibility that he's now starting to show, because we have been in a bit of a poor form recently, and for him to make these bold decisions like dropping Sanchez, like bringing on Nkunku, like taking off Palmer, our best player, for a defensive-minded player in Chalobah, it's very nice to see him making these big, courageous decisions and getting us wins, getting us points, getting us back into the top 4 and 2 points clear after a victory versus West Ham. Hopefully we can see a similar performance from our Blues in our next game in the FA Cup against Brighton, which I will be previewing in a live stream on this channel as ever. But if you can't wait until then, perhaps check out this video on screen in the meantime. Thank you guys so much for watching as ever, and remember, in the rain or in the dry, keep that blue flag flying high. Come on, you Blues.